Good afternoon to those of us that are still here. I know that it is late afternoon and we've had an amazing day. And I sat and listened to the amazing presentations this morning, as Kim said, as humans, and not men and women. Because my presentation, I thought, afterwards, Glory, what am I going to say more than you haven't heard today? And there's not much, I must say. As I said earlier on in our feedback from our round table, I realized that we have synergy in the room. There's a lot of like-minded people, at the tables. We've demonstrated that. But I almost just want to reiterate what many of you have said, those before me, which really deals with, let me just see, that's it, which deals with the land of awe. Now, at a recent event that we had at the university, one of my absolute role models, Prof Nina de Klerk Overton, she said and spoke about the land of awe, and that's not O-R-E, but O-R. The dualism that we sit with, that we have to choose the one or the other. So we constantly thinking that I am, as Kim said, this, and therefore I cannot, or I am, have to choose between sitting in this room or at another place. So we heard whole approach was, let's move away from the land of awe and embrace the land of and really work with the principle of Letsema, which our VC, Prof Mpedi, in his book called The Baobab to the Mosquito, which I can really recommend for a good read on how we implement and how we associate leadership in South Africa and in Africa based on some excellent quotes and African quotes. So in my small presentation, I want to really look at three principles or three concepts, which is purposeful relationships, which I believe is the glue that holds together networks and then also the collaboration that we have. Now, I know you all have amazing ideas, and thank you, Charlotte and Ronelle, for the opportunity to share some of my thinking here today with you and be part of this amazing event. As women, we are often caught in this thing, but there are all these stumbling blocks. And seeing that we have been telling stories, I've got plenty of stories with the privilege that I have of sharing my life with plenty of young people and wonderful young minds. My students enrich my life tremendously, and after 28 years as an academic, I can really say I have had wonderful experiences with my students. So, sharing some of their experiences has also created for me, those strains of your life, those aha moments that we can relate to. So one of those moments I had the other day with a young lady called Inga Sabata. Now, Inga was a student in the 2009s, and she's also married to one of our students in class. But I invited her to come and speak to the students, our current students, and telling them about how it is possible to be an entrepreneur with a communication qualification, because everybody thinks that they can communicate, but not all of us are, including myself, always that great at it. So Inga said something very interesting, and your question earlier on raised that as well. There are so many stumbling blocks, so many barriers to entry for young people and females and small business. All of those are there. And she came with this, and I subsequently had a reflective test for the students around this, and they all said what impressed them from her presentation was how she started small. And very often we think it's the big things. We can only be worthwhile if we do it big, if we have arrived, if we have already made it in business. But she started small. She was qualified, she worked in agencies, she worked on massive accounts. Those of us in the banking industry would relate to her agency work as a communicator. And she started with one sewing machine. One little Elna, like I have for 40 odd years now, little Elna, where she started herself sewing. And consequently, building, as she made a name, people still seeing her creations, started building a reputation. And with that reputation, she then started buying more, buying 2, 3 more sewing machines, eventually an industrial one, eventually getting somebody else in her little cottage where she started off. And that's how she grew. Leaving her 9-to-5 job, as she said, with 3 little kids, a husband, all of these roles that we have as women, and being an example to young people of how it is possible. But that and I think that is what, for me, the biggest message is today, is we all have a different journey to wherever it is that we are going. And very often your journey and my journey are completely different. And the question that I want to ask all of us is, do I want to know where my journey is? Because that sometimes takes away the fun in the whole thing. Because the adventure that we need to build into our achievements, taking stock, every now and again just turning around and reflecting, where is it that I'm finding myself? And somebody had a ladder up this morning with small, stops and then with bigger ones. And I thought to myself, I often find my own reflection in the one with the big gaps. Taking a long time, instead of making it a regular practice, to stop and think, what is the milestone? What are the things that I have achieved? What can I improve? Because we can always improve. But how do I actually just stop and relax a little bit? We all go, I'm always reminded of these ducks on a pond. We all very calm and collected, but glory underneath the surface, we are pedaling like crazy. And I think we get into that right. So, purposeful relationships to me is really what we show to others. The purpose is what we show to others, but the passion, the hard stuff, comes from inside. And I'm really glad to say that I enjoy my work as an academic so much, and I've grown tremendously in the years, that to me, my academic career is not boring. It is not something that I hate when I get up in the morning. I'm tired, make no mistake, but I do enjoy because I like the journey. I appreciate every day's opportunity to influence and work with other people. Yes, these young people are quite hungry for just somebody that's caring about them. So apart from the academics, which we always have with us, I have just a few points there, and you are all quite capable of reading, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. What I would like to highlight, though, is that by cultivating purposeful relationships, collaboration can harness the collective power that we have of diverse stakeholders, us, to drive meaningful and sustainable social change. Now, I want to ask you, what is the change that you want to see? What is it? Have you thought about the actual change? Something that really worked today for me, apart from being a female and liking all the gifts that I'm getting, but it is especially the crochet and the knitted stuff. that you've handed out, Anna-Marie. It is just making such an impact, because immediately I could say, oh, this can go for my little grandson, and that one can go for my little granddaughter. And also to the orphanage that's near me. And that connection is now something that I want to take and say, but look at this project and the connection that we can make. So that purposeful relationship that we are starting to build here is what I would like to take further. So, in the case of collaboration, how do we now take this further? Because after a day like today, I don't know if you suffer from sensory overload like I do, because there's just so much, and I'm really trying my best to be there in the moment and taking notes and taking in as much as possible. I know how it gets me when my students sit on their cell phones, and I'm always the conspiracy theorist and thinking they are looking at other things and not at me. And that's terrible. But you get such sensory overload that in the end, I don't know what are all the key nuggets that I'm taking away from today. And that's when I drive home now in the traffic, that's where I'm going to sit and think of how do we start collaborating? How do we start with making this all real? Everybody has been asking and saying, how do we put this into practice? How do we find solutions that are sustainable and taking it further? So Letsema, as I referred to earlier on, speak about the voluntary collaboration that we have ingrained in us. Somebody said earlier on the whole thing of piggybacks. I think we sometimes forget about the wonderful recipes that our omas, our gogos had. And they are the ones that's ingrained some of these real phenomenal ways that we have lost. And why don't we get that back with good storytelling and good examples? You know, if you just look at the Stokvels, how successful so many Stokvels are. And there's brilliant studies. That's my biggest problem in life, is all the wonderful studies that's being done and research that's being done at universities, and people don't do anything with it. There's such knowledge there. And it's as academics, it's our mistakes. Because once you've done that study, Renelle, I'm sure those of you with your PhDs in the room would know, it goes onto a beautiful shelf, lovely leather-bound document, and you're very proud and very sick of the thing afterwards, and you don't want to talk about it afterward. But it's a great pity, because there's a lot of wisdom in that, and that we very seldom share that. So in essence, collaboration and networks are essential principles for driving effective social change. That's what we're all here for today. Women of stature is just a vehicle. Am I right? Because we want to affect social change. By coming together around the shared values that we've all established we have, respecting each other, I think, which is really something that that I experienced here today, is the mutual respect. And I think what is also so nice of female events, we actually acknowledge each other. We look in each other's eyes and we smile at each other. And we want to learn from what it is that the other has to offer. So the big thing that I'm interested in is how do we build these networks? Those of you that know me, and Renelle and I, by the way, come a long, long way. Apart from being at the same varsity, the old RAU, the White Gevaar, we have, over the years, rekindled our friendships. But she would know and tell you how I go on and on about networks. Because, yes, there's a lot of theory around networks, but very few people can actually tell me, where do we start with these networks? How do we get that first connection, and then what happens afterwards? And who tracks? Nobody tracks. Very few people track. There's only your real, very, very serious salespeople, because they see another sale coming from that. But in essence, very often we plant a seed, and it's the start of a network. And then we forget to cultivate that network because the moment is gone. And I want to urge us to really work, as I have on the screen. It's amazing theorists that I'm following, Kent, Maureen, Taylor and Kent. They have a principle now in public relations. Those of you that don't like public relations would say it's spin doctoring, like my husband. He would say when he's angry with me that I'm the spin doctor, and then I would say, you're the engineer and I don't like you. So, but in public relations, we have the danger in so many other disciplines where we fake it, where we are less truthful, and that we use the connections and the networks that we have only for a transaction. You know, what's in it for me? The stuff that I spoke about earlier on. So the concept that Kent and Taylor is bringing to the fore is the tertius urgens, which is then that third, that we must be the third that binds, that connects, and really make that our science, and not the science of how many connections we have. Now, the last slide, what I would like to challenge you. How do we measure this impact? How do we ask, what has it actually meant? Now, this is another field that I'm really starting to explore, is apart from it being measurement and all of the ROIs and all of those financial terms, I want to know, how do we actually measure our social impact, but more so the value? How do we measure and determine the value of what we are having here? Now, earlier I spoke to Elle, and she told me about this experience she had in America, where there was this gentleman cutting what you call him, the iceman, ice artist, with this block of ice. And we all know the principle of what the artists see and what we see are two different things. But that, cutting that piece of ice into, or sculpting it into a beautiful artwork, is what I think we often forget when it comes to measuring and determining the value. What you see in your mind and what the other person sees are not always on the same par or on the same level. So the value is really what others see in what we are doing. So here we are, beautiful group of ladies, we're enjoying ourselves, we're talking a lot, and we're experiencing a lot, and so forth. And then, what happens outside of this room? What is the value that we bring to the other people around us? So networks for social change in the global south are dynamic. It must be dynamic. It must be inclusive. It must be collaborative. And it should leverage, and I love what you are doing, all of you that have showed your local principle or local projects, because they are what we call in academia bottom-up, in public relations. But it is just boils down to we're involving those that actually are going to make use of your service, or that's the target group of what it is that we want to change the world with. So in the networks in the global south, especially in our area, and I'm currently working on a big international dream which Runel knows about, and connecting students internationally. And what is interesting for me is how the interest is being sparked and how the network is being built, and that is a whole new study on its own, because I don't know necessarily. I'm making connections, I'm working very hard, and every possible person that I meet anywhere that can connect me with any student group here and in Africa and in the world is on my radar. Yes, I've got a purposeful question that I want to ask you, but I don't know where it's going to land in the end. Am I going to be successful during this year to have 2 big events? I'll have to come and tell you. So, lastly, ladies and gentlemen, it was wonderful sharing my thoughts with you and having just the opportunity to sit and listen to so many of you. It is with this in mind that I want us to learn from the diversity in the room, that we have purposeful relationships, collaboration and networks. All are here for the common good, but there's one thing that keeps them all together: interdependency and connection. So we're moving away from the land of all and moving into the land of and. Thank you.